am working under a 3-year grant to bring restorative practices into an urban middle school in Grand Rapids, Michigan. My position is precisely one that Ted Wachtell cautioned against. I am essentially a single restorative presence in an otherwise punitive environment. I'm currently in year 3 of my 3-year grant. I firmly believe, based pretty much entirely on anecdotal evidence, in the promise of restorative practices, and I desperately want to help my school become fully restorative. And I actually do think I'm making inroads, but to make the case that the grant should be extended and expanded, I need to be armed with more than anecdotes. I need to have some concrete research demonstrating the impact of whole school change and the most effective way to get there. Unfortunately, I found that research very hard to come by. Even with Zoe's expert search method, I could not locate either a qualitative or quantitative article specifically on the topic. Instead, I reviewed a qualitative study about how teachers and administrators think and feel about restorative justice in one school in Ontario, Canada, and a quantitative study on the effect of a particular restorative intervention family group conferencing on recidivism rates of children under 14 years old who have committed their first offense. But neither article specifically addressed my topic of interest. This was my first surprise. The literature review in each article supported the anecdotal evidence, but was short on reliable studies. What I learned from the first article did not surprise me, but it did disappoint me. Essentially, the findings were that when funding and commitment to ongoing training were withdrawn, the teacher's overall experience with restorative practices was negatively impacted. The district I work in is reluctant to spend money to train a team of staff in RP. As I read the qualitative article, I realized that the most devastating finding was that the commitment to RP waned in the school district where the study took place. I have up to now been so hopeful that RP was reaching a tipping point that I failed to consider the role of policymakers with short attention spans and tight purses. Even if the district where I work agrees to make a stronger commitment financially and philosophically for the next few years, my fear is that the success of RP in the schools will be dependent on the whims of policymakers. When I began this course, I knew so little about research that I didn't even know to be afraid that I'd find something that would rattle me. I presumed the research would show overwhelmingly the benefits of whole school implementation of restorative practices, but it did not. When I read the quantitative research article, I had an even more rattling realization. That study showed no appreciable difference between a restorative intervention and other diversion programs in reducing recidivism rates among youth with first-time offenses, even though it seemed like the researchers were bending over backwards to find RP to be a more effective intervention. This was a powerful oh no moment. What if this process, the learning of which has been so transformative for me, isn't all it's cracked up to be? The implications of that possibility are quite profound for school districts and juvenile justice programs that are fully embracing the promise of restorative practices. And frankly, the implications are profound for me personally. The grant under which I work requires a study of the effectiveness of our program. Among other variables studied, the researchers are following the suspension rates of the schools where my colleagues and I are practicing, and the data is not favorable. The data shows that the number of suspension days saved by our style of RP implementation is minimal or even negative. With those results, coupled with studies that lack reliability, it will be hard to convince policymakers, grantors, and school district administrators that they need to invest more money in this promising intervention. But the researchers of the quantitative study in Indianapolis acknowledged that the restorative intervention consisted of a single 1-hour conference. And even with that, one significant finding was that youth completed the restorative intervention at a rate 17% higher than the other interventions. Program completion was strongly correlated with success in not recidivating within 24 months. So even though there was no difference in recidivism rates between youth who completed the restorative intervention and youth who completed other interventions, the fact that youth completed the restorative intervention at much higher rates suggests a preference for that type of intervention. In a similar vein, the restorative intervention at my school is at most a 45-minute intervention. It is a minimal and discrete restorative practice, so it should not come as any surprise that it is minimally effective in reducing suspension rates. It does, however, have an effect on many students who complete a circle. They like and seek out circles to resolve their conflicts together. Learning how to interpret the research helps me understand the gaps in the research on my program. That research is proposing to study the effects of RP on suspension rates, but it is actually studying the effect of maintaining a primarily punitive structure on suspension rates. Suspension rates in a punitive environment reflect the behavior of the administrator more than the behavior of the kids. So in a sense, the researchers have selected the wrong independent variable. Probably the greatest challenge I encountered in this course was learning how to be evaluative without being interpretive. I wanted to respond to the substance of the articles I read rather than the adherence to sound methodology. Also, brevity is not my strong suit. Of the three major assignments, this one definitely calls upon a skill set I do not possess. If you are watching this, then you should know that I am very proud of myself for figuring out how to make this happen. I am wildly out of my comfort zone and would suggest an option in the future for those of us who are comfortable with writing and not with new technology. Perhaps all three assignments could allow for this option. Of course, evaluating research was also new and a highly practical skill. I feel confident that I can reread the research study conducted on behalf of my grantor and evaluate it for gaps, but also for substance. This will help me help the executive director of the agency I work for so that she can explain the results to the agency's board of directors and to the school districts where we have piloted RP so that we can continue our work to bringing restorative practices into the schools, hopefully in a more comprehensive manner.